This is related to the name of the Greek god Hermes in his role as the interpreter of the messages of the gods. Hermes was believed to play tricks on those he was supposed to give messages to, often changing the messages and influencing the interpretation of the messages. So the Greek word thus has the basic meaning of one who makes the meaning clear, because Hermes scrambled the meaning. So a person into hermeneutics clears up the meaning. In other words, this person said these things from that culture, but here's the context that they came from, and here's what we can really get. Here's the objective truth about it. Now, we can see a plausibility to this science. Like I said about the Plato example, this is a science that is plausible. It could have applications and may be very useful and very necessary to understanding texts. Absolutely indispensable, but is corrupt today. Corrupt by Kantianism, subjectivism, Marxism, James Dewey, just about any other pervert you can come up with has probably got a hand in it. And I've come across little passages about the hermeneutics of certain subjects in psychology texts and sociology texts, and possibly geology texts. We'll just go on here. It mentions scriptural hermeneutics, which I'm not interested in, and I'm thinking of doing a video on why refuting religion is not tantamount to affirming reality, and why I'm not upset about refuting religion. I believe that it's evil, and I'm an atheist, but that there are much more important things to do with my time. Religion's dangerous, and Peikoff, for example, believes it's the most dangerous thing for the country right now. But I don't believe that just attacking religion gets you anywhere. I think you have to affirm true things also. So that's what I spend my time doing, and I'm going to do a video on that subject. But anyways, I'm going to skip the religious section here about hermeneutics, which you can go to Wikipedia and get if you're interested. The history of Western hermeneutics. Hermeneutics in the Western world as a general science of text interpretation can be traced back to two sources. One source was the ancient Greek rhetoricians' study of literature, which came to fruition in Alexandria. So everything goes back to ancient Greek, including the name of this science. The other source has been the midrashic or patristic traditions of biblical exegesis, which were contemporary with Hellenistic culture. Scholars in antiquity expected the text to be coherent, consistent in grammar, style, and outlook, and they amended obscure or decadent readings to comply with their codified rules. By extending the perception of inherent logic of texts, Greeks were able to attribute works with uncertain origin. Ancient Greece and Rome. Aristotle strikes a chord in his treatise De Interpretatione, or De Interpretation, however the Greek goes, that reverberates through the intervening ages and supplies the keynote for many contemporary theories of interpretation. His overture is here. Words spoken are symbols or signs of affections or impressions, affections or impressions of the soul. Written words are the signs of words spoken. As writing, so also is speech not the same for all races of men. But the mental affections themselves, of which these words are primarily signs, are the same for the whole of mankind, as are also the objects of which those affections are representations or likenesses, images, copies. Equally important to later developments are texts on poetry, rhetoric, sophistry, including many of Plato's dialogues, such as Cratylus, Ion, Gorgias, Lesser Hippias, and the Republic, along with Aristotle's Poetics, Rhetoric, and on sophistical refutations. However, these texts deal more with the presentation and refutation of arguments, speeches, and poems, rather than the understanding of texts as texts. Now, what does it mean to understand a text as a text? As Ramberg and Jessel note, G-J-E-S-D-A-L note, only with the Stoics and their reflections on the interpretation of myth do we encounter something like a methodological awareness of the problems of textual understanding. Don't know about that. Some ancient Greek philosophers, particularly Plato, tended to vilify poets and poetry as harmful nonsense. Plato denies entry to poets in his ideal state in the Republic until they can prove their value. In the Ion, Plato famously portrays poets as possessed. Now, it has a section from the Ion, but we're just going to skip that because if you want to get the... So poets are possessed by the Bacchic frenzy, B-A-C-C-H-I-C. Aristotle saw in poetry the possibility of truth in imitation. As critic David Richter points out, for Aristotle, artists must disregard incidental facts to search for deeper universal truths. So they have to disregard the incidental and look at the deep meaning of a thing. Instead of being essentially false, poetry may be universally true. So a poem speaks to many people across many different levels of experience. Richter, The Critical Tradition, page 57. In the Poetics, Aristotle called both the tragedy and the epic noble, with tragedy serving the essential function of purging strong emotions from the audience through catharsis, with a K. On to the Renaissance and Enlightenment. The discipline of hermeneutics emerged with the new humanistic education of the 15th century as a historical and critical methodology for analyzing texts. In a triumph of early modern hermeneutics, the Italian humanist Lorenzo Valla proved in 1440 that the, quote, donation of Constantine, quote, was a forgery. Now here we have a real-life example where hermeneutics is actually a science that is indispensable to proving historical documents. Through intrinsic evidence of the text itself, Lorenzo Valla proved in 1440 that the donation of the Constantine was a forgery. Hermeneutics expanded from its medieval role, explaining the correct analysis of the Bible. Now, it doesn't go on to say any more about that case there, but it shows that the text referred to cultural practices, some of the word origins traced to times after the text was supposedly written. So by basically scientific, rational investigation, he showed, this could not have occurred that far back. That is a science. That's hermeneutics. That's meaningful. What context did this person write this in? He wrote this in the context where this word could come into his mind, where that word could come into his mind. What's the origin of this or that word? Oh, that word has the origin in blah, blah, blah. Oh, well, that comes after that point. See, that's a science, and that can be useful. But, of course, it's corrupt today. Anyways, continuing. Now there's a section titled Schleiermacher. Friedrich Schleiermacher, from 1768 to 1834 he lived, explored the nature of understanding in relation not just to the problem of deciphering sacred texts, but to all human texts and modes of communication. The interpretation of a text must proceed by framing the content asserted in terms of the overall organization of the work. He distinguishes between grammatical interpretation and psychological interpretation. The former studies how a work is composed from general ideas. The latter considers the peculiar combinations that characterize the work as a whole. That sounds like the beginnings of linguistic analysis. The peculiar combinations that characterize the work as a whole. Schleiermacher said that every problem of interpretation is a problem of understanding. He even defined hermeneutics as the art of avoiding misunderstanding. The next entry is titled Dilthey, D-I-L-T-H-E-Y. William Dilthey broadened hermeneutics even more by relating interpretation to all historical objectifications. Understanding moves from the outer manifestations of human action and productivity to explore the inner meaning. In his last important essay, The Understanding of Others and Their Manifestation of Life, 1910, Dilthey makes it clear that this moves from outer to inner, from expression to what is expressed, and not based on empathy. Empathy involves a direct identification with the other. The other. That sounds German.